This is Research Like a Pro, episode 399, Merging and Separating Identities with Jan Joyce. Welcome to Research Like a Pro, a genealogy podcast about taking your research to the next level, hosted by Nicole Dyer and Diana Elder, accredited genealogist professional. Diana and Nicole are the mother-daughter team at FamilyLocket.com and the authors of Research Like a Pro, a genealogist guide. With Robin Worthland, they also co-authored the companion volume, Research Like a Pro with DNA. Join Diana and Nicole as they discuss how to stay organized, make progress in their research, and solve difficult cases. Let's go! Today's episode is sponsored by newspapers.com. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Research Like a Pro.
Hi, Nicole. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I've been having a good time reading everyone in the study group their objectives for the Research Like a Pro with DNA project they're working on, and it's been interesting. What did you think when you read through them?
I agree. Lots of different localities. I saw one in Germany, actually a couple in Ireland, several in the South, like Virginia, one in Chambers County, Alabama, which is one of our localities, so that was fun. Yeah, I love seeing what people are trying to solve with DNA, and there was even one that was trying to find an adoptee parent, but, back a little bit, early 1900s. So everybody's working on something different and interesting, and that's the fun of the study group. You work on your own project, and you have other people help you and look at your work and see if they can give you some feedback, and you make progress. So it's awesome to be up and running with that.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised to see that at least two people are actually using DNA evidence to help with an identity objective and trying to figure out which of these men of the same name is the parent of this person living in the same location. So that was really neat. Usually everyone has a relationship objective.
Oh, that's nice. One of the Irish projects was actually using DNA to try to find just a location to search in Ireland, which is what we've done a lot with our client work. Because once you find the location, then you can go to work searching really specifically in that area. So that was a fun one to see as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's do some announcements. Our next Research Like a Pro webinar offering will be in March on the 21st. That's a Saturday at 11 a.m. Mountain. And this will be by Heidi Mathis. And her title is Adopted Grandparents' Biological Parents Were Also Adopted, Using Autosomal DNA and Y-DNA to Answer Family Mysteries. So this client's grandfather was abandoned on his adoptive parents' front porch in 1939 at age 6. Which family stories were true? Was he Polish and abandoned by immigrants? Was he related to his putative biological parents, Roberta Overstreet and Robert A. Bach? The client and her uncle's DNA test provided the clues needed to point the documentary research in the right direction to answer these family mysteries. Our presenter, Heidi, is a graduate of the Research Like a Pro with DNA and Research Like a Pro study groups and a researcher at Family Locket Genealogists, and we are very grateful to have her. She's an amazing researcher. Our next Research Like a Pro study group begins August 2026, and our peer group leader application is on our website, so we'd love to have you apply if you are interested. And then, as always, join our newsletter that comes out each Monday to see new blog posts, new podcasts, any of our upcoming lectures, and other fun things we have to offer. We are very excited because Roots Tech is this week, March 5th through 7th, at the Salt Palace, downtown Salt Lake City, and we are so excited to see many of you. So be sure you stop by our Family Locket booth or come to one of our lectures and say hi.
Yes, say hi. We love saying hi to everyone we see at Roots Tech. Well, we are really excited to have Jan Joyce here with us on the podcast today. Hi, Jan.
Hello, Diana and Nicole. I'm so excited to be talking about merging and separating identities. It's one of my genealogy obsessions. But before we do that, I heard you say this is your 399th episode. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Looking back, do you have any highlights or favorite memories to share? How about some bloopers? Anything you can tell us?
Well, I do remember that the first time we recorded, we had to keep starting over because we kept messing up or thinking that we messed up or giggling. And so I think we restarted several times.
Well, and then I don't know if it's really a blooper, but a major snafu was when we had tried to get ahead and we were being so efficient and had recorded like 5 episodes ahead. And then we found out that the platform we used to record did not get any of my tracks. And I had
Oh
to
my
go back
goodness.
through, listen to the podcast, and then try to respond appropriately. It was just such a nightmare. But I
That
did it.
sounds
I
horrible.
was just so mad.
No, that sounds horrible because you're trying to remember how you answered it well the first time.
Yeah, exactly. So that sticks out in my mind as one of the challenging things, but it's been such a fun journey. And yeah, now we don't stress so much about saying things wrong. We know everybody out there is forgiving.
Well, we all thank you. The community thanks you because I know I've told you guys this before, but I love listening to them, and I especially do that when I'm driving long distances. I'll queue up 1 or 2 episodes, and I often go back to the same one to remind myself of things I want to employ in my research.
That's so fun. Thank you for listening. And I will say that our next episode, we're going to have a whole bunch of fun things to talk about for our 400th episode, going back and kind of sharing some stats and some listener comments who've been with us for a lot of years. So that episode will be fun to
Excellent.
listen to
Super fun.
and reminisce.
I love it.
Well, before we talk about merging and separating identities and the fabulous course that Jan is coordinating, let's read Jan's bio so that all of you can get to know her. Jan Joyce is a board certified genealogist whose journey began in 1998 while managing the marketing initiatives at genealogy.com. Her personal research delves into ancestral roots across Iowa, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, tracing lineages back to England, Germany, Ireland, and Norway. She holds the CG and CGL certifications from the Board for Certification of Genealogists, BCG, and the AG accreditation from ICAPGen. Specializing in research methodology, Jan divides her time between personal research, writing, and education. She developed the comprehensive assemblage course for the Salt Lake Institute of Genealogy, which guides students through preparing, writing, and revising case studies and includes artificial intelligence. Her innovative document work workshop helps aspiring genealogists prepare for BCG certification. And she has pioneered the new Institute course, Merging and Separating Identities, Strategies and Tactics to Solve, to advance the field's research strategies and tactics. So, with that, let's learn more about the Merging and Separating course. So, this course is designed for genealogists ready to master the art of identity resolution. Merging and separating provides hands on strategies for tackling complex cases. This virtual institute course features engaging instruction, real world case studies, and practical exercises where participants learn to apply analytical tools, mapping, and fan club techniques under the guidance of course coordinator Jan Joyce. The course costs $550 to register. So, Jan, tell us when the course starts and how often does it meet?
Awesome. We'll meet on Thursdays beginning April 30th, and it goes through June 11th. So it's 7 weeks of classes, which is really a full institute course with 20 fabulous sessions. Can you tell I'm biased? And we'll meet from 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Mountain Time.
Well, that's going to be great. And the weekly format is going to give everyone lots of time to digest everything they're learning.
I think so. That's why we've changed it this year. We'll talk about that a little bit more.
Well, I know for one, I'm excited to go through this because this happens to everybody, having identities that are merged or just difficult to tease out. So, what is the most common mistake people make with a same name problem?
Well, there's several, but I think maybe the starting point of that is we might not even realize we have one. So I'm going to use this example throughout our conversation today for Henry DeWitt. And Henry DeWitt is a person who we use in this course in the common data set. So we might have several records for Henry DeWitt in the same geographic area over the same time period. And we assume, or let's just say, I assume it's one person and I start building that family tree. But then things stop making sense. My timeline was off, the children's names are off, birth dates don't fit patterns, or there's a wife name that appears and disappears. So instead of stepping back and questioning maybe some initial assumptions, we might try to force the puzzle pieces together. So by the time we realize that, we might have 2 or 3 Henry DeWitts, like I did, merged into one. And then it really becomes difficult to unravel.
Oh, I think this feels very familiar to anybody who's done genealogy. So this will be great. And I love that you've got this common data set of this Henry DeWitt to explore. That is going to be very fun.
I think so. It's great.
Okay, Jan, well, tell us, why is merging and separating identities suddenly getting so much attention in genealogy?
Well, I wouldn't say it's sudden, Nicole. We've had merging and separating case challenges for decades. But what is accelerating is our resolution of these cases, and that's just fascinating. First of all, we have more records digitized than ever before, which means we're finding more instances of our ancestors appearing in different places, often with slightly or significantly different names. I do remember back when I started genealogy research, I forget who said this, but someone said, if you think about the records that are available to us online, it's like an iceberg tip. In other words, we see that there's this little tip above the water and we think, that's all that's there. So I think, that water line is receding and the tip is expanding as we have so many more available now, which is fantastic for all of us because traveling is difficult. Secondly, DNA testing has exploded. So when people get unexpected DNA matches, we often discover we've been working on the wrong person entirely, or we've merged two people into one. And then the third reason that merging and separating cases are getting more attention now is that AI tools are making it easier as we search across massive databases. That's fantastic. Yet they're also creating confusion when some algorithms might suggest connections that may be or may not be correct. So the real issue is that many of us have not been taught systematic methods to tackle these cases. We might be winging it, and that leads to us building our own brick walls, and we could have avoided it.
Agreed. And I think you're so right about the algorithm suggesting these connections. I just think of all the ancestry hints that are for somebody who lives in a completely different continent, and it's obviously for a different person. So if we're not careful, we can easily add incorrect information.
Definitely.
Well, for the sake of our discussion today, let's shorten calling these types of cases from merging and separating identity cases to MS cases. So, do you remember your first MS case?
Oh, I do. I personally became fascinated with merging and separating identity cases when I solved a case and subsequently published it in 2017. This case was not the more typical case of too many Henry DeWitts, but of one woman with the same name, Susan Gliddon, who appeared in England and Canada and then in Ohio with a new married name. I had to prove it was one woman, and I'm happy to say that I did. Since then, I've been slightly obsessed with the topic of MS cases. Thus, that case is what began the idea of this course and started creating the material.
Oh, that's so fun. I think that we all have done that. I mean, taking a person who migrates from one place to the next and trying to say that's all the same person. At least that's super common for the research I've done in the South, in the southern states, because people don't usually stay in the same place starting in the 1800s. And as the West expanded in the United States, people just moved west in my family. So
I love that. And that makes the timeline so important, right? As we're proving the locations that they're in and not in. So the negative evidence becomes much more obvious when we've created those timelines and seen that they really weren't in some place before they were, and vice versa.
Well, I think the example of a woman is important because, as we know, a woman could have many different names once she, if she marries multiple husbands, and trying to prove her identity is another one of our big challenges as researchers. So I love that you're including that in this umbrella of cases. So can you give us a specific example where someone in your course discovered they'd been researching the wrong person for years?
Oh, yes, that's a great question. And it's interesting when during the course, those aha moments occur and people say, you don't know what I found last night. So they're both like heartbreaking yet exhilarating because then they've turned a corner, right? So one student was working on her third great grandfather, I'll call him William Thompson, for over 5 years. He was born in Virginia, migrated to Ohio, married and had children. Normal life story for us, right? But during the course, when we worked through the identity dossier building process, she started to systematically record every descriptor into her spreadsheet from every source. And that's when she noticed an occupation discrepancy. Her William was listed as a farmer in 1850 then a blacksmith in 1860. Now, it might not be an atypical progression, but she dug deeper, used the timelines, and discovered there were 2 Williams in the same township born within a few years of each other. And she'd been mixing their records for, years, right? So the beautiful part was once that she separated them, she found her actual ancestor and using the methodologies we teach, and her William had actually moved on to Illinois and not stayed in Ohio. An example of my own case, let me talk about this Henry DeWitt a little bit more. What led me astray for so many years is there's this beautiful image of a loose leaf Bible page online. It has the full names of 7 children and their birth dates on it. So, and the last names of all these children was DeWitt. So the handwriting appears appropriate for those birth years of 1774 through 1797, though it all appears to be written at one time. Now, get this. Over typed on the page, it says, said to be the children of Henry DeWitt and Sarah Elizabeth Friend. Okay, those are my people. I know you already get it. That was typed on the page. But I've been taking that information as accurate for years. So using the methods in this course, I've disproven that. And it was a combination of using so many of our course techniques, such as timelines, identity dossiers, and spreadsheets, AI, and offline methods that broke it open for me. So those assumptions we make once and forget later why or what source it came from can really make a difference. And in this case, it was a source with information that surely was accurate, but not for my Henry DeWitt family.
Just the wrong family. And that's so frustrating when somebody types onto the original source, they put something wrong on there. Just wish you knew who did that.
I did. And that person is no longer on that forum, let's say. I tried tracking him down.
Oh, and they had the best intentions, I'm sure, but it is difficult when something like that has been misleading researchers for years.
Agreed. And it's just populated so many different online trees, as you can imagine.
Oh, yes. Well, what happens to people's research when they don't address these identity problems?
Well, that's a good segue, isn't it? As you just heard, it gets replicated over and over. It corrupts so many lines in a family tree, and then that just goes down generation by generation, right? So it's not just about that one person. It's about their descendants, their siblings, and their in-laws. And the really concerning part is that with the online family trees and DNA matching, these errors can multiply. So someone copies a wrong tree, then someone else copies that tree, and suddenly there are hundreds of trees online with the same mistake, just like that Henry DeWitt Bible page. And of course, the more we see something, the more we think it's right, So this course addresses it head on by teaching us how not to solve our cases, but then also how to document it so others can understand your reasoning and hopefully avoid that same confusion.
Yes, it's going to be so exciting to have so many people in the course learning how to solve their own case and document it.
Well, I am very interested in all of the different documents and the methods we're going to use, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But what should someone do right now if they suspect they have a merging or separating identity problem in their own research?
Well, first of all, that's a great sign that they have that suspicion. I love that. And my first answer was, is it okay for me to say, come join us in our course? Of course, that's what I'm going to say. But seriously, then, stop adding information to that part of your tree. Don't magnify the problem. So back up and gather every source you have for that individual and create a spreadsheet or a list. I use the spreadsheet as my research log now based on these methods that we teach. And so I just almost start over because I know something's wrong. And then, ask yourself, am I 100% sure, this source is about that same person as the others? If I can't say yes, I probably have that identity issue. I loved in your introduction when you told us that one of your study group folks was using DNA for an identity case. That's fantastic, right? That ties right into what we're doing. Most of our cases are about same name individuals. I mentioned that Susan Gliddon, which was the same name in different places, but we often have same name individuals in one place. And that one of the problems is we might have too many records of that individual, plus his or her family, plus all of the fan clubs. So that was my case with this Henry DeWitt problem. I literally have 950 records in my spreadsheet for answering one research question. And I couldn't do that over the last 10 years. But by slowing down and analyzing and then recording every descriptor from every record, that exercise alone often illuminates our problem and then our solution. Last year, some of the students told our instructor team over and over how overwhelmed they were with creating an organizational system to support this type of case. So that became, I didn't go into the course thinking that was a major problem, but we just heard it so many times as they almost had given up because they just didn't know what to do next. They had too much information. So that's why we simplify it. We take it step by step in the course with tools along the way. I want to emphasize that tools are really important, and that's what we give to the students. And Nicole and I like to laugh, but we kind of geek out on our spreadsheets. We love them when we both show them in depth. So in last year's course, our students were so energized by Nicole's sessions on spreadsheets and specifically Airtable that many of them wanted to form groups afterwards to work together. I have to share the funny part of that is that I do like to have fun in my courses, and unrelated to this Airtable post-course meeting group idea, someone used the term a butter as a neighbor, like you're contiguous to them, so a butter. And I just thought that was so funny. So, and that became a running joke in the class day after day. So after everyone decided they wanted to create small groups and meet on Airtable, we decided we were going to call them the Airtable Abutters group. So that was fun, but also you can see how inspired folks were by this course, but in specific, Nicole's sessions.
Oh yeah, Airtable is amazing. And I can see how if it has been adapted for something very specific like this, it would be a huge, huge step forward in this type of a project. So how exciting that Nicole's going to teach and share, of course, I'm sure, the template that she created for it.
Yeah, and this year, and thank you for saying that, Dana, because Nicole's session was so powerful, we're expanding it and making it two. So people will have more time with it. We'll have more time to kind of sample it in a way and learn more about it. So I'm really proud to make that change and offer that to everybody.
I'm excited too. I think it's so fun to think of the ways we can use our tools like spreadsheets and Airtable to see our data in new ways that help us solve the problem. So it's just really, really fun. Well, how common is it for genealogists to have a merging and separating identity problem? Is it just, a few genealogists who have this?
I think that if any genealogist answered, I've never had one, or I don't currently have one, I think they don't know what they don't know, right? Because it's not rare. We might think it's only the case of the John Smiths, but it's not. I've already mentioned, Henry DeWitt. I've mentioned Susan Gliddon, and those aren't, highly common names. So in reality, almost every genealogist encounter these problems, not once, not twice, but multiple times. So recognizing them becomes really important. So we've all seen identity confusion with unusual surnames and in small towns and in well-documented families, but it's just anywhere. So I mentioned Henry DeWitt already. Some of the records about him are used in our common data set, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. In this particular case, I had men with the last name DeWitt, and 5 of them were Barney DeWitts, 4 Henry DeWitts, 2 Pauls, 2 Davids, 2 Johns, 2 Peters, and 2 Williams. So any of those, I don't know if I did the math right, but 17 men-ish could have been either his father, brothers, or cousins. And so I had to and did use literally every technique from the course last year to resolve this case. And super happy to say that I did. And it's also currently under review to be published in a journal.
Woohoo!
I know, right? But so I think we mentioned a couple of these already, but the way that the instructors and I think about MS cases is in 3 categories. And the first category is same name and same location. So I think that's really important to distinguish it, same name, but also same location, meaning we're in the same general region, it might be a county, might be a few counties together. Again, I have the 4 men named Henry DeWitt, not even the John Smith scenario, and they all have strong connections to one township in Maryland and Ohio. Nicole, can you guess what the second category is?
Let me see. Is it same name, different location?
Yeah, it is, right? So This is what we talked about already, where we have one person moving, right? It could be an immigrant, it could be just migration within a country. So we can't tell if it's the same person with the same name in different locations. So in Susan Gliddon's case, she didn't change her name except when she married, but she was in 3 drastically different locations. So the timelines, the negative evidence became crucial in resolving it, and then proving that she was in one geographic area, she was not in another. And then the third type of case is a different name. And to me, the location doesn't matter. It could be in the same location or it could be in different geographic locations. So this category has some fun examples. Diana and Nicole, can you think of any scenarios that fall into this category?
Well, we've already mentioned this one, but women getting married and taking on a new surname.
Definitely.
And I have got my Polly Cessna, who went by either Mary or Polly, and sometimes in the very same document. And she was first a Baker, and then she marries and becomes a Cessna. Then she becomes a Royston, and then she divorces Mr. Royston and goes back to Cessna.
Oh, lovely.
Trying to decide, trying to put together the evidence that this is the same person was tricky, but yeah.
And reverting to a name is fairly unusual too. So yeah. That's great you found that.
Early 1800s in Georgia.
Wow.
So interesting.
Totally. Can you guys think of any other examples of name changes and why?
Well, I'm thinking about those immigrants who maybe come to the United States and their name gets a little bit changed or anglicized or simplified.
I agree. And we might think that, Ellis Island changed it. I think that's been basically proven wrong, but some form of anglicization happens, either because they want it to or someone around them. It's easier for them, right, from a phonetic standpoint.
Right. Well, we talked on the podcast several episodes ago with one of our researchers who had a criminal case about a couple of Johnson brothers who completely changed their names because they had been involved in a case in Texas in the 1800s and tried to change their identities, but, it was teased out that these were the same people.
Awesome. I love them. Those are like the most fun ones to talk about. We see them published in journals often, but it's when like the criminals create aliases, and they're like running from the law. I'm like waiting to find one of those in my family, but nothing yet. I'm well known for having a bunch of boring farmers, but someday someone's going to come out of the woodwork as a criminal. I'm sure of it.
Well, we kind of have a criminal. We have our Uncle Dick Schultz, who shot a man in Oklahoma and then escaped to Arizona territory in the early 1900s. And he was always in the census with his family as William. But then he starts using Dick. And he was in family stories. I'm like, is this even the same person? So yeah, that was a kind of a tricky one. Don't know why the names changed.
So he changed or just started using a different first name, but kept his same surname? Okay.
Yeah, but it didn't make any sense why.
Didn't make any sense, yeah.
Yeah, we couldn't figure out why that name. But you never know how people get started being called something, I have. For sure. We all have nieces or nephews or children where we start calling them by a really weird nickname and it's Dicks.
Yeah, I agreed. And like that kind of segues into like maybe the last example I can think of in this category, which is like social acceptance and potentially like immersion into a new culture. So if something would work better for us as we are trying to assimilate, I think that could be another reason for slight or significant name changes.
That's so true. And you just never know why someone might change their name. I remember a practicum case that I was doing where someone had changed their names, and there were some things in the newspaper that gave some hints about why the name change might have been necessary, but there wasn't really an obvious, like, this was the reason. But we just kind of had some possible reasons, and then he moved and changed his name and took on a new identity, and it was still kind of a mystery, but it is interesting to see that happen, and we don't always know exactly why.
I remember in one of my cases looking up the law for what it would take to change a name. And I did find it, but I found, it might've been on like Julie Russell's blog or something, a legal blog, that even though the law existed, if someone changed their name, it was, very few people complied with the law that you could just change it because we don't have, they didn't have nearly the technology tracking them like we do today. So you could just move, change your name.
Right? Just show up in a new place and hey. All right. Well, that was kind of fun to talk about those. Well, let's have a quick word from our sponsor. Are you ready to take your family history research beyond names and dates? If so, newspapers.com is a game changer for genealogists of all levels. With access to over 1 billion pages of historical newspapers, you can uncover rich, untold stories about your ancestors that you won't find anywhere else. Imagine discovering a detailed obituary that reveals the extended family, or a local news story that highlights your great grandmother's role in the community. Maybe you'll come across a photo capturing a moment in your ancestor's life, something that brings their story vividly to life. Newspapers captured the everyday details, announcements, happenings, achievements, and challenges that paint a fuller picture of who your ancestors were and what their world was like. These primary sources reveal the social history behind the names on your family tree and help you connect with your past in a personal, meaningful way. Searching is simple and intuitive, letting you explore by name, location, or date to unearth those hidden gems. Ready to enrich your research with stories you won't find in traditional records? Visit newspapers.com/familylocket today and get 20% off a subscription. Start turning your family tree into a family story. All right, well, let's talk for this second half of this episode a little bit more about the course and kind of some questions people might have we could try to answer. So, first of all, what kind of experience and expertise is needed to register for the Merging and Separating Identities course?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to preface it with my experience as a instructor in both as a marketing professor and in teaching now genealogy materials. And I can tell you that I created a lot of new courses when I was a marketing professor. And every time I created a new course, I mean, I'm super energized. I love it. And I go into it thinking this is like great material. After I teach something the first time, I realized, oh, I have some changes to make. So maybe I got that 60 or 70% right. But that second time is really a sweet spot in subsequent courses because then I've been able to change it and update it. And I'm saying that because it's led me to this first comment and answering your question, Nicole, about what kind of experience and expertise is needed. So we're more strongly saying this year that we'd love to have students come in with experience with a spreadsheet program. I don't think I probably emphasized that enough last year. It doesn't mean you need to be an expert. It doesn't mean you need to know all the tricks. But just having worked with a spreadsheet program is pretty important because that's what the common data set is based on. We are completely agnostic about which one. We talk about Excel and Airtable and Google Sheets. Those all work great. And each one of them has enough features to do what is needed in this course. So we feel like for a student to maximize the course, knowing one of those, the basics even, is just important. Last year, we had a few students who had less experience with a spreadsheet, and they did tell us that they still learned a lot, but it would have been better coming in with that knowledge. So they all realized the importance of it after they saw what could be resolved with them, and so they left the course knowing that they were going to learn more about spreadsheets. That I would say is the most important thing. Other than that, it doesn't matter. Like education experience level varied quite a bit last year. If I remember right, we had 5 or 6 or 7 certified genealogists and accredited genealogists. And then we had people who were fairly new to genealogy research. So any level can have their toolkit expanded as well as their knowledge from the course. In terms of preparation, there's 2 things. One is the common data set we'll talk about in a minute. And the other thing is optional, but if you come into the course with your own unresolved merging and separating case, that would be ideal because then you can work through it week by week, applying these techniques and evolve it and hopefully resolve it by the end of the course or shortly thereafter. It's not required, but if you have one in mind, that is fantastic. And if you don't, you could work the common data set in the same way.
I love that. I think that's so important to think about what case you might bring to the course and how it can advance your knowledge of how to solve the case as you think about it and practice with that case. And I was just thinking to myself, what case do I have that I could use? And I immediately thought of William Keaton, who I've researched a lot about his married life, where he lived in Pendleton District, South Carolina. But prior to that, a lot of people suspect he was part of the Revolutionary War, but there were multiple men of that name. So it's always been kind of a project I've had on the back burner to resolve that. And it would be really interesting to find out, if my William Keaton was in the war and if he served and where from and all that. So that's the one I thought of immediately.
I love that. And now that you've said it publicly, we might have to hold you to that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yes, if we go far enough back on your tree, you're going to find somebody you haven't researched, and those are prime suspects because, like you said, Jan, with all the merging of trees and people just putting records in willy-nilly, you have no idea if any of it's correct. So anything like that. But I've got my John C. Klein that I'm trying to figure out the next step, and there are so many John Kleins, and yeah, there's one in particular that's been merged, and I can look at it and say that's definitely not the right one. But yeah, he might be one to tackle. It would be fun.
All right, you guys might have to have a little competition between the two of you.
To see what happens. All right,
good idea.
Yeah. So I would love to know a little bit more about the guest instructors. I know about this one called Nicole Dyer, but
I haven't heard of her.
Can you tell us more about them? And I'm sure you pick them very carefully for their experience. And
I wouldn't even call them guests. Like this, they're the reason this course exists, right? And I can't rave about them enough. Like, as a little background, I'm proud to share that I work really hard at identifying like the needs in the course and my own holes in experience or expertise so that others can bring that. Each of these instructors brings a really unique set of experiences and approach, which results in expertise in an area. And it's just invaluable because there's no single right way to solve one of these cases. So let me tell you about each one of them. So Lynn Nelson brings a published same name case study to the course. So students will be able to read that ahead of time if they want or after and have Lynn share how she resolved it. Kristen Bertanek will teach about artificial intelligence. Hers, I have to say, was probably one of the most mind-boggling sessions for our students because we came to the course with a really varied set of experience, expertise, and mindset on AI. And Kristen makes it quite approachable and easy for us all to try, or if we're more advanced to grow our skills on it. And I have to tell you, I still go by Kristen's mantra is if there's something I'm doing in my research that's, slow and repetitive and just driving me crazy, then AI can usually help. And she goes obviously far beyond that. So I've expanded her from 1 to 2 sessions because people really wanted to get their hands on kind of workshop time to test this. Kim Richardson kind of goes to the opposite end of the spectrum. So while Kristen is on cutting edge, high tech AI material, Kim goes the opposite. She goes offline, all right, using physical materials, tangible materials, things we can touch, like sticky notes, index cards, visual sorting. And this really appeals to all kinds of learners, but especially kinesthetic ones. I've had people tell me that Kim's methods, like honestly, it's going to make me almost tear up, changed their entire research process because they didn't learn like everybody else and they didn't know what to do until Kim provided this. So that's very effective. Patty Hobbs, who is a DNA expert, will bring the DNA perspective and shows us how genetic evidence can confirm or contradict traditional documentary research. And Nicole, I wasn't saving you for last on purpose, but Nicole, who is an expert in many things and could talk on most of these subjects in this entire course, she is specifically targeting spreadsheet mastery, which we've obviously emphasized so far. And it was also so powerful. That's why after the course, everyone wanted to stay together and keep working on Airtable. And there were so many aha moments from Nicole sharing what she does, how she does it, and how to use spreadsheets we were all just completely inspired. So this team is just fantastic.
Well, you're so nice to say those things, and we can't leave you off the instructor list because the course wouldn't exist without you, and it was your idea, and you did so much research to study all of the cases that exist in like the NGSQ and other places to understand all the different aspects of merging and separating cases, and then compiling a giant case study for everyone to use with a common data set. So we have to include some kind words about you here because they're
Thank
all
you.
true.
Well, I think one of the things for me that is important as a student when I take other courses is like course cohesion, I guess I would call it. Like some institute courses feel to me like they're like a series of webinars just kind of strung together. You know what I mean? Like plop this one in, plop that one in. And that's not our approach. Like we all work together ahead of time, shared materials, and except for the case studies, each instructor uses and references the common data set. So that's woven into the course. So as one instructor is demonstrating a technique, she's not now showing you a whole new example, right? Where you have to learn the geography, the names, whatever. So everyone's using this common data set. So all the students have to focus on is the technique, not trying to figure out again, like, oh, who's Marvin Jones, like whatever, right? So the instructors work hard and that comes across to people. Additionally, in my opinion, they go above and beyond, and they've been known to help students in like a one-on-one basis, someone who's stuck on something or wants a little bit of additional insight. So I'm really proud of that group and just the effect that they've had on folks.
Well, I am excited to learn from all those. And those are some new names for me. So I am always interested to see how other people solve problems. And I think that's one of the values of this course is getting some new ideas. We can get stuck in our methods and the way we look at things. It's always valuable to get a new approach, a new perspective, and it might just be what we need to get going on our research again that maybe we've given up on.
Exactly. And I think, coming into this course with an open mind and willingness to try something new, even if it feels uncomfortable, it's not what you like, those are those aha moments I treasure because honestly, people do kind of come in and go, "Oh, I'm not going to try AI, or I'm not going to try sticky notes, or I'm going to try this." And then, we're like, we strongly encourage them to do so. And they'll come back a little sheepish the next time we meet and say, I tried it and it was fantastic. I'm like, right. So
I love that. That's so fun.
Well, let's talk for a little bit more about the common data set. Why is this so important to work with the same case data?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I know we've mentioned it multiple times without telling anybody what it is. So let me just define it first. It's a group of records that I provide to students ahead of time. And I haven't come up with a better name yet, but I'm open to renaming it. I'm just calling it the common data set. So it's about Henry DeWitt. And so I'm giving out, I forget the number, but let's say 40 records on Henry DeWitt and his family and maybe some of his fan club. And then asking students to apply their own techniques to that data set ahead of time. So we're not giving instructions. That sounds very strange, right? But what we want each student to do is using their own system that they're comfortable with, kind of like go through the records. Maybe they want to create a research log. That's most typically what people did last year. So they created a research log, and the format of the research log does not matter, to kind of become familiar with the data and to begin thinking about how they would merge and separate the Henrys that are in the case. So we are asking people to spend time on it ahead of the course, but doing so becomes really important because then you kind of fly through each of the sessions in which we use it. We're looking at the same Henry DeWitt, but we can follow along with the instructors. So then as we go through the course, you can take that technique that we demonstrated during a session on the common data set, but then you apply it to your case. So you're learning with shared data, but then practicing with your own research. So students who do that pre-course work with a common data set really will get more out of every session because they already understand the basic facts of the case and they're not trying to absorb new information. Some of the students, I think if you check out the video testimonials, you'll see this, and that's linked on our course page, I think, Nicole, but we can put it in the show notes as well, where students told us they think we should tell everybody it's mandatory to work on it ahead of time. I'm like, well, I can't really tell anybody that, but it changed their learning so dramatically.
Yes. And I think just getting familiar with the records is helpful. And then thinking about how you might apply techniques that you have learned over the years is such a good preparatory thing to do, because then it's on your mind when you hear Jan's method and Lynn's method, all the different methods people are sharing, you've just tried doing something like that and you can see, oh yeah, and it will click so much more to think about what needs to be done in these situations.
Exactly.
And I'm so impressed that you put together the work to do that common data set, because that is a lot of work preparing that.
Well, and you know what? I pulled it. So it's like, let's just say it's 40 records ish, right? And I pulled it from those like 800 or 900 that I told you about, and had to just really work on it to make sure that those would end up, being effective in terms of making it manageable for pre-course work, but also for our examples during the course. And that seemed to work well. So I didn't get any constructive feedback on that, so to say.
You didn't have anybody say this was
Mm-mm.
terrible. I hated this case. I felt like that with some other cases I've done in other practicums, like, oh, this was just ridiculous. So anyway, that's good you didn't get negative feedback.
And I'm open, especially, and I tell people the first time I teach a course, I'm like, look, you guys are our guinea pigs and we're here to make the course better. So I really do take feedback quite seriously. And I have made changes from it. So I want to always improve.
Oh yeah. Every time we do one of our courses, we always look at the feedback and improve the next time. It's amazing.
Yep.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how this course is set up, because we're having 20 sessions over several weeks. And when you taught it first, it was all day for a whole week.
Yep.
So tell us about your choice of changing that up.
I think we hinted at it already, but the new format of once a week for 7 weeks or however many weeks suits my style of instructing as well as learning better. Because again, probably because of my background in marketing and teaching marketing. And in marketing, I taught theory, but I also taught a lot of application. So I didn't have Scantron tests of definitions. It was like, hey, go do this project, right, and apply the theory to something that was that was not theoretical, right, that was real world. And so that's where I'm coming from. And I want to do the same with genealogy. So I don't want to lecture at people, if that makes sense. I have a much different style of being open and lots of Q&A. I want everyone's questions answered. So we talk about the material and we interact and engage. And then now with a multi-week format, they can go and practice those things in between sessions. In 1 week, you're exhausted after 6 or 7 hours of sitting in an online Zoom course, right? And a lot of people still diligently did work during the evening, but it is exhausting. And I think we comprehend less and retain less in that format. So that's the background for moving to a multi-week format. So I'm really excited about it. Students need this time to let things marinate. It actually makes the instructors better too, right? I think of so many changes I want to make, and I can change course or add them in the next week. So this is really great format for all of us. We're really excited.
Well, and I think it makes it more approachable for people who just can't take a whole week out of their life. 1 day a week, catch up on whatever you didn't get done, go back at it. So I think it'll be great to try it out this way.
Agreed. And actually that was feedback from the session. Right before we talked about taking feedback, and I asked the question, now you guys are done. Of course, I can't change it for you, but in the future, what do you think of this in a multi-week format? And overwhelmingly, they said yes.
Great.
Well, we love a multi-week format. That's how we do our study groups. So it's great.
It is good.
Well, now let's talk about AI tools for a sec, because you mentioned that Kristen's going to teach about that. How do AI tools help with merging and separating identities?
Oh my gosh, so many ways. And as I mentioned, we had, and I think we still will this year, and even in future years, have students come in with varied experiences and expertise in AI. We want you to know that's okay. What Kristen explores and teaches us is fine for any level. So we just ask that you're open-minded. So even the folks who came in last year as what I would call AI doubters, that came out of Kirsten's sessions ready and willing to try it. Those were probably the bigger group of who came in the next week a little sheepish saying, okay, I tried it and wow, look what it could do, right? So AI can be just so powerful for us in terms of pattern recognition and processing vast amounts of data faster than we can, right? So it can help us identify potential name variants. One of the things I did with it for Henry DeWitt, I always think I have all my spelling variants. I totally know that DeWitt is DEWITT, DEWIT, DE space WITT, and NE DEVITT. What didn't I think of? White. It comes from of white. So I didn't even have white on my list to look for. And Claude, my AI boyfriend, figured that out. So now I have that on my list as a alternate spelling potentially, or variant, right? So, but AI doesn't replace us, right? AI doesn't understand genealogical proof standard. They don't know when evidence is weak or strong, and it can't really evaluate source reliability the way we can. So here's how we teach students to use it. Like, let it be your research assistant, not your decision maker. Use it to do like the legwork, right? Organizing data, spotting patterns, and even generating ideas for you. Lots of times when I use AI, I'll ask a question and I won't like the answer, but it will make me think of something else that I use. So it's just really great to bounce things off of it. We're still really important in the equation, and that will never change. One student, remember, used AI to suggest that two women with different surnames might be the same person. And the AI confirmed it, but it took a traditional approach to prove it conclusively. So you can think of AI as like a magnifying glass that helps you see some details you might miss, but you're still the one who needs to interpret what you've seen.
That's so great. I love all of those ideas about AI being your assistant and not your decision maker, and still being part of the process as the human.
I'm preaching to your choir there, Nicole, I think.
Yes, indeed. AI is so powerful, but yet can be so troubling. You have to be so careful. Well, I noticed that you have a literature review component. So why is that part of the course?
I know. Doesn't that sound so horrible and dry and boring? You can admit it. I hear you laughing. I know you were thinking
literature
that, you guys.
Review. No, I love literature reviews.
Okay. But first of all, it's one of my several topical obsessions in genealogy. And I've taught about it for years and written about it and everything. And again, this might be my biased, academic background, right? We always start with a literature review. So let me describe what it is. So a literature review is identifying published material that can help you in a case. And so for us as genealogists, our interpretation of that is usually that case isn't going to be about our family, but what we can learn from a case is if it has a similar problem, and then we can learn about how that was resolved. So from this Susan Gliddon 2017 case that I resolved, since that point, I started keeping this database, an Excel spreadsheet. You guys, I'm such a dork. I'm so sorry. But I started keeping this database of like MS cases. And every time X or Y or Z journal was published, I'd add to the database. And I started adding webinars. So now there's like 105, 110 sources or resources in this database. And it's not just like the listing of them that's important, but then I've read every case and watched every webinar and broken it down in about, 25 or 30 ways to tell you like what kind of case it is, what kind of things were used to resolve it, etc. So it's my work over many years, and that I describe it in our course, and then I give it, that Excel spreadsheet, that database, to our students so they can use it for their cases. So what they can do is look through the cases and find out which ones might mirror theirs the best, and then go read those articles or watch those webinars and get ideas. So it's basically like learning from the experts, but trying to be more specific.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing. That would be worth the course. Just that right there, getting that resource. That is so
Someone
much
told me that. Someone told me that.
Oh, I am really excited about that because I love your term, learn from the experts. Sometimes you just need to see how somebody else solved it and the type of sources they went to and what they had to do to get something actually proven, to give you the idea of how much work it's going to take to prove your case.
Right. Yep. I use literature reviews for all kinds of reasons. Type of case is one of them. So it's so powerful.
Nice.
And it often gives you ideas that maybe it didn't use them, but it'll just give you a new idea, like, oh, I need to try this. So very powerful.
Jan, what is the difference between how a beginner and an experienced genealogist would benefit from this course?
So that's a good question. I would say that we have designed it, or at least either intentionally or accidentally, that everybody can grow from the course. And from what folks told me last year, the folks that were more in the beginner or even intermediate end benefited the most from like some foundational techniques and tools. So learning how to identify descriptors and collect them and put them in a spreadsheet and use that spreadsheet. Learning about what an identity dossier is and how they can use that to try and tease out if there are multiple identities. And then just understanding the three main types of scenarios. So beginners and intermediate can all learn from those concepts, so that they establish like good habits from the start. One person who was fairly new to genealogy told me, like, I wish I'd taken this course before I started any research, because now I should have understood what I've been tracking all along. I think we all have the I wish I knew then what I know now kind of regrets, right? But
Yes.
that's like, we can't become expert at anything immediately. So and then I also mentioned already that we had quite experienced researchers in our group, some certified, some accredited, and some experienced, just with amazing expertise and education. But they've been stuck on a case for years, because, like me, probably with that Henry DeWitt Bible page, something stuck early on that I didn't go back and re-question. But this course provides like techniques, tools, and I'd say the time to think about those more, to think about them slowly and more thoughtfully. And we provide the tools. So I'm excited that we can provide that to really different levels of genealogists. I think some person said something like this to me last year, like, I was doing advanced research, but with beginner tools. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to think about it, right? So I really feel like it does have a lot for everybody.
That's so true that we can be a beginner and get a lot from it, or we can be an expert already and get a lot from it too, because we're working on some of our own cases and applying it.
Exactly.
Well, I always feel like a brand new genealogist whenever I start one of my projects, because we might be working in a different location or just something different record set. If you've never used a specific type of records and then all of a sudden you've got to use those, yeah, you're a beginner again. Doesn't matter how many years you've been doing this or how experienced you are. So I agree. I think a good genealogist is a good learner.
I love that. And I think that, we have a lot of education junkies that we all know, right? And I am also an education junkie. And this course feeds that need and that desire, but it also helps people become experienced junkies because they can do, right? They can take action immediately and not just sit and learn. So I love that it's combining both those things.
Yeah, that's really fun. Well, can you tell us some success stories you have from those students who took the course?
Sure. I love the testimonials that we have on video and in writing, and those will be in the show notes. So check those out if you haven't yet. And I have to tell you that for me, that's why I do what I do. Like, I teach because I love the success stories and the breakthrough moments and seeing that excitement, hearing that thrill of someone having a breakthrough. So there's like breakthrough stories. So they've been stuck on a case for a long time and they finally cracked it using one or more of the methodologies from the course. One woman was trying to identify her great-great-grandmother for years, and she used Nicole's like spreadsheet and correlation techniques to finally distinguish between three women of the same name. And then, she found her ancestor. So that's like amazing. There are some kind of like what I would call prevention stories. Students who realize they have or could in the near future make a mistake. I know that sounds kind of strange, but one participant discovered she'd been on the verge of merging two people into one, and that would have, of course, messed up her whole line. So the course helped her separate the identities, before she did damage. And my favorite stories like breakthroughs are transformational ones where students completely changed their research approach. Several people from last year told us that they now start every new project with many of these methods. So not just MS cases, you guys. Like, I was have to say very surprised to hear that. It makes sense now that I think about it more, but I didn't anticipate that as an outcome, is that so many of the things that we explore in the course can be used kind of for all cases, not just MS cases. So one student said, this fundamentally changed how I do genealogy research across the board, not just for identity problems. And it was amazing.
Well, I believe that anytime you get organized and have some tools, it absolutely changes what you do. Airtable changed everything for us. Actually, doing accreditation was a huge change for me in just getting a research process and using a research log. I mean, those things are huge.
Agreed.
So I can see how it would really go across the board, the changes.
When I think with many of us at the point of like, I think I only have hard cases left. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have any more low-hanging fruit. And so I now have to be more thorough, more thoughtful, slower than I was before. And a lot of these tools help with that.
Agreed.
Well, this course is a significant time and financial investment. So, how can we help students determine if it's right for them?
That's a fair question. And we really do want students who would benefit from the course. So I think some things that would indicate a good fit, we mentioned, some comfortable use of spreadsheets would be important. That if they can attend, the multi-week sessions in person. I always prefer that over, watching recordings. But obviously, some people have conflicts a week here, a week there. But I also had people who last year only watched recordings and wrote to me afterwards telling me about a breakthrough. And I'm like, I didn't even see you in the class, So I personally like people there because it engages me, but I can understand if they miss a session or two too, when we will provide recordings. People, like we just mentioned, who want to become better researchers overall and not just solving a quick problem. This is knowing that some of these things don't sound fun. You know what I mean? Like logging a bunch of descriptors into a big spreadsheet doesn't sound like a bunch of fun, but I kind of loved it. And those kind of things that sound challenging become some of our best tools for solving problems.
Okay, so you've given us some good tips for who is right for this course. Is there someone who's not right for the course or who should not take it?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that, Diana. Let's see. So I would say really just being open-minded and willing to try something new, even if it's uncomfortable. That's where I'd really land. So if you're getting your hands dirty in this course, right? You're doing things, you're trying things that are really different. And if you're, I guess, opposed to that, then I would say it's not, you wouldn't be satisfied. So that's the only thing I can think of there.
Well, that's fair. So what do you hope students will take away from this besides these techniques?
The techniques for sure. And then I would say the confidence and open-mindedness. So if you look at some of the testimonials, one word really stands out to me. And when like more than one person said it, I was kind of blown away. And they used the word empowered. They said they now felt empowered to go back and research. In other words, they had the confidence and they knew they could try different techniques to progress their case. So I think it's that feeling of empowerment that is fueled by the techniques that makes people excited and successful.
Well, I agree. I think confidence and curiosity are just amazing.
I like that.
All right. Well, tell me about the materials that support the course between sessions, as well as any homework.
Okay, great question. I should have mentioned this earlier. So if anybody has been to an institute course, there's something known as a syllabus, which is a misnomer, in my opinion, having come out of academia, right? A syllabus is like 1 or 2 or 3 pages that tells you what you're going to study every week in class. The genealogy version of a syllabus is a textbook, okay? So it's something that is usually 200, 300 pages, where each session is supported by a 5 to 15 page document. And so compiled, that makes this truly a textbook, right? And what I've learned from a lot of past courses is that people don't open it, people don't read it ahead, people don't look at it, they don't refer back to it. And I'm thinking, I want things that are actionable and important for people. So what we've created in this course has support material for every session that sometimes is provided before the session, sometimes during the session, and sometimes after the session. So it's very like worksheet oriented, so that it's like one page of how to, or like where people can fill in the blanks instead of like, 10 pages of explaining something. So it's very oriented towards that. And it also has other kinds of actionable tools, like I provide an Excel spreadsheet, Nicole provides an Airtable template. So people can start work right then and build their own case, right? So it's very oriented around hands-on and not around a lot of verbiage. We give out that common data set ahead of the course, and we ask people to work on that as far as pre-course work. And we already mentioned the importance of that. And then between sessions, we suggest things, but we don't require it, because if they want to go apply it to their own work, that's ideal. And then we have a 30-minute session before the next week's classes that they can ask questions or share frustrations or share successes, so that we can make sure we address everything that they learned from the previous week.
Okay, that is so funny because we always used to hear handouts, and now institutes say syllabus, and now I'm thinking, okay, I need to go back to handouts.
Yeah, I think handouts is much more appropriate for this course.
It's just funny that I do remember back in college when we would get that contract called the syllabus, and that was like the outline of the course.
Yeah, it's nothing like this. I don't know who started this in genealogy. I want to have a word with them.
I love it. Well, that kind of goes back to this idea too, that you have time to tweak things in between.
Yeah, exactly.
So that, you can see something's needed. You add that rather than a syllabus that you have to turn in typically like months in advance. And then as things change, there's no opportunity to go update it. So
Yep.
this is really great format. Well, as we finish up here, let's just have some fun, because we've heard that people say your courses are fun. And why would that be?
Well, thank you for asking that question. I do like to have fun. I do like to have a light atmosphere. I do like to have people engage. That's, I guess, the basis for it. But it also, like, if you're enjoying yourself, you learn better, right? So hands-on workshops, open environment in which no question is bad, helps us to have fun. And gosh, I can't quote this verbatim, but someone last year did say to me, I learned as much from my classmates as I did from the instructors. And that made my day, right? We have so much to learn from each other. And then I try some other techniques that just make it fun and overall. So as some examples are, like, one of the worksheets that I have is in the Mad Libs format. You guys remember that? Like, that little, you flip a page and like you fill in blank words with a hint underneath as to like what it should be. Like, like it might be a travel story. So you fill in like a vegetable and whatever. So we use Mad Libs to help understand some of our assumptions. I use a hidden pictures in a drawing to replicate some of our research process. And then it's even just during our Zoom sessions, we like to have fun. Like each session I have someone add something to their Zoom name that tells us a little bit more about them. And we can go off on those topics. Like we could go on tangents if we wanted to, but like, we might say like, what's your favorite dessert? But we usually try to make it like genealogical related, like what's the strangest name in your family tree? So that's super fun. And then we also do stuff like dressing up one day for taking a class photo. So we just try to have a good time, and that makes people, I think, have a better environment to learn.
Well, that's a fun idea, dressing up and taking the class photo. That's awesome. Those are all really fun ideas. I love it.
All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed hearing all about this course. And if you're anything like me, after this episode, you're excited to work on your own case and on the common data set. It's going to be so fun. And if you haven't registered yet, there's a few spots left. So come on over to familylocket.com and click on shop. Then go to Institute courses, and then you'll see the Merging and Separating Identities course, and you can register. And if you're already registered, think about who you can bring, a friend who might want to sign up with you, who would enjoy having fun and learning about separating and merging identities. Well, thank you so much for coming, Jan. This has been so fun to have you and to talk about this.
I love this material so much. And as you can tell, like our instructor team is fantastic. So we really love putting it out there for everybody.
All right, everyone. This is so fun. We hope that we'll see lots of you there. And Thanks for listening to this episode. We will talk to you again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope that something you heard today will help you make progress in your research. If you want to learn more, purchase our books, Research Like a Pro and Research Like a Pro with DNA on Amazon.com and other booksellers. You can also register for our online courses or study groups of the same names. Learn more at familylocket.com/services. To share your progress and ask questions, join our private Facebook group by sending us your book receipt or joining our courses. To get updates in your email inbox each Monday, subscribe to our newsletter at familylocket.com/newsletter. Please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. We read each review and are so thankful for them. We hope you'll start now to research like a pro.